Okay, good morning and welcome to this Planning Applications Board. Hope you're all well today. In regard to the current content of the meeting, a reminder of the following points. Please ensure your microphone is off to prevent background noise. I will call on the relevant officer to present the report. If a member or officer wishes to ask a question or raise a point, please do so using the raise your hand function on your device. I will invite each member in the queue to speak, and at that point, please switch your mic and camera on. After you have spoken, please ensure that you lower your hand and put your mic off. Your device should be positioned so that your image is clear to the other participants, and please speak clearly and concisely directly at the camera. When calling for agreement of the recommendations, a no show of raised hands will be taken as indications of the committee's approval. In regards to declaration of interest, members are reminded of the protocol. You must leave the meeting by ending the call, which will be confirmed by the moderator to the chair, and following consideration of the item, you'll be invited back into the meeting by the moderator. Please ensure you are available to accept the invite to rejoin. And finally, a reminder that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Comhairle's website following the meeting. Well, the first item on the agenda is a minute of the meeting of the 22nd of June. That's for your approval and accuracy. Agreed? Item number 2 is declaration of interest. Members are asked to declare any interest they may have in any item on the agenda. It would be helpful if members explained why they are declaring an interest in the item concerned. No declaration of interest? Okay. Any amendment contrary to officer recommendations moved by a member must be based on planning reasons. If such an amendment is proposed, the chair may choose to adjourn the meeting pursuant to the timeout protocol. Members are reminded that a decision which is not based on legitimate planning reasons would leave the Comhairle exposed to the risk of legal challenge and potentially significant costs arising therefrom. Item 3 is the site board with privacy fencing at Eilean, Isle of Lewis. Head of Economic Development and Planning, Helen McLennan, will take us through this planning. Helen?
Thank you, Chair. I'll take you briefly through the proposal and then the report, and then we have a slideshow with some images from the site to give you some context. My apologies. I'll share the first slide just as it contains some information relating to the proposal. And please forgive if you can hear some additional chatter in the background. My son is homesick and I can hear him behind me, so my apologies.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just give that a moment to make sure it is sharing properly. Hopefully you can all see that now. The application reference 21-00049 is a planning application to site a caravan pod for holiday let with associated parking, decking area, privacy fencing, and the development is at land associated with 2 existing pods called the Seacroft pods in Eilean on the Isle of Lewis. The land is owned by the applicant and not in crofting tenure. The site is within a national scenic area and a landscape character described as linear crofting. 16 representations were received to the application, which is why it is presented to you for a decision today. The issues raised in representation are summarised at 11.1 in the report and largely relate to impact on settlement character, views from the settlement, road safety, well-being of people in the area, and also potential public access concerns. The next slide I'll take you to will just show you the site while I take you through the description of the development. Again, just bear with me, it seems to have a little bit of a lag on Teams. Hopefully you can see that next slide now. The area of Airduig in which it is situated is to the north of the original crofting village and just at the very beginning of the former RAF camp. The proposed pod is a 2-bed pod measuring 6.6 metres in length, 3.6 metres in width and 3.7 metres in height. The proposed fence is 1.5 metres in height, and I'll take you on to the next slide so I can show you how that sits in relation to the road. This is the applicant's submitted plan where you can see the proposed pod. The green line highlights the area of proposed fencing which runs along the road edge and returns slightly into the applicant's development site here. Originally, the application did raise some concern in consultation with our roads colleagues. The original height of the fence proposed was 2 metres. This caused concern in relation to road safety for visibility when exiting the site, and also caused concern in terms of visual impact from a planning perspective, as it was immediately adjacent to the public road and was not in character with the surrounding areas. Section 14 of the report will take you through the development plan assessment and each of the relevant policies in relation to development strategy, settlement, caravans, roads and other related matters. The representations are taken through in detail at section 15. Again, many raise similar concerns, but they're all detailed there as well as in full in Appendix 4. Having reviewed the entirety of the proposal against the development plan, it is considered that the policies support the proposal. When considering the representations, no matters were raised that would weigh against finding in favour of the development plan and therefore not to depart from the development plan. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to the conditions at Appendix 1. I have one small note to make. I received a call late yesterday evening from someone who had made representation who had viewed Appendix 5, which is the views of the applicant, and wished me to make a note at the meeting, which I'm happy to do. The views of the applicant noted within them that they had had deliberate damage to fencing, potentially for croft access or moving animals. This is obviously not verified. It is refuted by the party who believes the comment was made about. So I just wish to highlight that, but also evidently that's not a material planning consideration in any regard, but we included all comments which didn't refer to any individual, just for transparency, obviously, in the way we did with both representations and views of the applicant. That's the key points in relation to the report. I'll just take you through the PowerPoint so you can see a bit more of the site. This just shows you the style of the pod, essentially. As I said, a 2-bedroom pod. The 2 existing pods on site are 1-bedroom. And for a little bit of context again, they measure similar in length at 6.1, similar in width at 3.4, but are slightly lower at 2.9, the proposed pod being at 3.7 in height. This is a view of the site from entry into Éire Dúig. You can see some of the traditional croft houses. You can see some of the former accommodations for the RAF, as well as in the distance the actual radar buildings and various things up there. The site is about here. This building is Arison and Fair Cleash. This is a house owned and rented out by the applicant, and the 2 pods that the applicant wishes to add to with this proposal. This is a view from the village road directly over the pod site, which would be here. You can see obviously some fencing may have been preemptively started. The applicant discontinued this when they became aware that consent was required. It's a small seating area they've created to serve the existing pods, as you can see one there. It's a view of the existing access into the site, their existing house and 2 pods. The parking area is proposed to be extended into here to serve the new pod, which would be located here. Again, just to give you a view of where the fencing would be, the existing house and the existing pods. This is the closest unrelated property. It's called Ocean View, and it is a house. This is looking south, again across the pod site, back towards the southern part of the village and the village road. The site is obviously close to the communal track. It's a parking area associated with some housing and the Arison and Fair Cleash building, which you'll see in the final slide, which is just coming up. And there we are. Just wish to highlight that, as you'll know from reading the report, it is noted in a few of the representations. So just to give you some context when you're considering those points. I'll take you back to the 3rd slide now, just which shows the site plan, in case that's of any assistance with any of your queries. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Helen. I'll open it to questions. Anybody want to ask Helen any planning questions? Recommendations are for approval. John N. McLeod.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Helen, for the report. Yeah, I have no objections to it. I quite agree that the proposal should go through and all that. It's just a general question on maybe in the future, you know, there's so many pods going up nowadays, and they seem to be getting bigger and bigger. I'm just worried sometimes the delivery of them and the infrastructure and also our services, you know, with the water, the sewage. Is it something we should be concerned about for future use? I know you guys will do a great job in making sure that everything's tip-top and won't be given permission into that. So it's just a concern I've got. That's all I want to mention. Thank you.
Well, note of that, John. We'll take a note of that, and we'll see what we can do later on. Because I know I quite agree with what you say, and I think it is something that we have to look at. Anybody else want to? Norman MacDonald, Councillor Norman MacDonald. Councillor Norman MacDonald, you're muted.
My apologies. Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Helen, for the presentation. I've brought this up on several occasions before at Sustainable Development, I think, and at planning, the unfettered applications for pods, and I think we've approved in the last 4 years certainly in excess of a couple of hundred of these things, so certainly 100. And I know with the planning regulations it's difficult for us within the framework to have anything other than approval of these pods, but my worry is at what point do we get overburdened with them? You know, there's going to come a point where every single person with a croft is going to put a pod on it, in my view. The legislation doesn't give us enough tools at our disposals to refuse these applications if they're competent enough, because we cannot refuse them if they're competent within the planning application and they fit the local plan. I think it's a crofting issue, and I was dismayed this week again to see that the crofting reform bill wasn't even being debated in Parliament. I think it's a crofting issue. I think the perpetuation of crofting has been seriously affected by people who are buying to speculate to build pods and second homes for. And I understand that we need to support the tourist industry, and I understand that it's a good supplementary income for crofting. But at what point do we end up in a situation where somebody's going to turn in and say, how did this start and why did we do nothing to prevent it? I think it's a wider debate, not just for the Comhairle, but for landowners, for particular trusts, for the Crofting Commission, for Parliament, that we need to be having with regard to development. And while development is necessary, I understand that. I think at some point we're going to have to understand that there will be an issue with this sort of development if it's unchecked in its entirety. So I think it's a wider debate, and I think we need to flesh it out with the Crofting Commission, with the landowners, with the land trusts, etc., and come to some kind of plan where we have some kind of, I wouldn't say restriction on it, but certainly some kind of overview of how it's affecting land ownership within the entire Western Isles. And I think it needs to be had. It's a conversation that needs to be had before we end up in a situation, as I said, where every second croft has got a pod on it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have any issues with the planning application here because it appears to be competent, but I do see a future where it's going to be difficult.
Okay, as I said to John, something we have to look at, and it's going to take more on the Comhairle to address this problem. And it's well, we can see it's going to be a problem, but that we'll have to take that as it comes in the future. Councillor Carl McMillan, you're muted. That's right. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Helen, for the presentation. I take the view that these pods, and I agree with Norman there, that it's a supplementary part of the croft income, even though that this is not a croft and it's not part of the traditional land estate. Perhaps I should declare an interest as a director of South Uist Estates. And these are no bigger than hen houses, essentially. And maybe after the war, the supplementary income, especially in Uist, was part of the egg packing station, so that every house had a large hen house attached, sometimes 2 or 3. So this is the present day iteration of the hen house at the time for supplementary incomes. And I would agree with Norman that every croft might end up having one, and I look forward to the day when every croft has maybe 1 or perhaps 3 for supplementary income, because if there are these things there, then people are in the place, and that's what we have. And when you look at Airduig, I'd been there a few times, going to Gallen Head a number of years ago when the masts were there and the station hadn't been, I think it was derelict or hadn't been sold on. So to have Uig, you might say, as from where Stornoway is remote, you go to the edge of nowhere and then a bit further. So if you look at the traditional crofting village as the linear, you then go into the RAF camp. So the 2 parts of Aird, I would say, are distinctly different. So the traditional part of Aird, I think there was about a scatter of 6 houses, but a line of 6 houses, and then the RAF camp. So the report said that a linear crofting township, and although there are crofts near it, it isn't part of the township per se. So I would support this, and there has been representation, but I think it would have to come as a little local difficulty. And as councillors, we have to do the right thing, not necessarily the popular thing, even though there are a number of representations which have been received, and including lawyers' letters and all the rest of it regarding ownership. But that's not specifically a planning matter in the same way that we have to look at what's before us and not the furore that's going on behind. But I would certainly support this, because taking the increase from 2 to 3 of the pods might make it more viable for people to live there. And certainly from Gallon Head, having walked across the bogs to the headland, they are not going to make it from sheep or any other form of livestock. So if they can get a viability to live there, I would support this on a socio-economic and the land use basis. So thank you for that, Chairman.
Thank you, Colin. We're straying into policies at the moment, so I think we just have to stick to the planning issue in front of us. Councillor Norman MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I'm very much in agreement with everybody who's spoken in terms of this. I think there is an issue there with regard to crofting, and I think as a Comhairle we should have conversations with the Crofting Federation and others who have an interest, particularly the landowners, as to how to move forward if that is indeed the right thing to do. I think the only way this could be prevented is through same thing as might happen in an urban area where you have overdevelopment. That might be the only way to stop these developments. And the other thing that is an absolute reality is that the crofting income is diminishing significantly, and I know of people, not necessarily in the Uig area, but elsewhere, where they get much more money in through having tourism coming into their area, and pods are the way of delivering that at the moment, and they make a lot more money out of the tourism industry than they ever would from sheep and cattle on the same land. So I think, you know, in terms of the decision we're being asked to take, I see no other option other than to agree with the members who spoke before that this application should be approved by us. But we do need to have conversations with others going forward, and I don't want to raise another issue where sometime in the not too distant future there will be further conversations about pods in a very different context.
Thanks, Lauren. So I take it we're all agreed on the recommendation for granting. Yeah. Right. Thank you all very much. Yeah. That concludes the meeting.
Thank you. Oh.